G'day everyone and welcome to episode 8 of the Battleforge Gaming Podcast presented by General Games. Now we'll talk a little bit about that later. Today, as always, I'm joined by BFG Justin.
Yeah, guys.
And our special guest today is Glen.
Hey everyone.
So welcome boys, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, Justin. Appreciate it as always. How you been going? How's the last 2 weeks treated you?
Yeah, holidays. It's been good. Haven't got as much done as I've wanted to, but I've been continuing work on the Blood Angels. Got that repulsor done finally, which
Looks good.
yeah, it was a mission. That was an absolute mission. Those grav pads, they nearly got me, but
I was going to say, it looked like a grind when you're doing the grav pads.
yeah, it was. But again, that's always good to show the community. There's going to be some areas on models you don't overly love painting, but I had the end goal in mind, and that's what got me through.
Yeah, I think every model nowadays just has so much detail. There's always something you'll find.
Yeah. I pity people who paint orcs because
Yeah.
not only do you have volume, but you've got all
Gene
that.
Stealer cults. They are the number one army.
Yeah,
I think that
agreed.
got a mention in the last podcast episode, actually.
Yeah, they're so tiny. They're not worth many points, and they have so many details.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of colours too. Yeah.
But
So
yeah.
I think that's about it. I haven't managed to do any more work on the White Scar tutorial, but I did put a lot of work in the before holidays. So, and we've got a tutorial in the wings anyway with the Death Watch. So, how's your hobby been, Mike? You done any?
No, not at all. I've been building a patio, so that's how my holiday's gone. Just more work, digging holes and concreting.
Yeah.
Which you were nice enough to help me out with today.
That day, man, so warm, so
Yeah.
many holes, so much concrete,
Yeah,
a lot of work.
it's rough.
Yeah.
I much prefer to hobby, to be honest.
Yeah, feel that.
And Glenn, thank you so much for joining us. This is our first time getting you on the podcast. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been doing a bit of building. I have done some painting, but that was to my deck as well. So I've been working on the house. So not much mini painting, but I've been doing a bit of building at least to get ready for some painting. So
Fantastic. What army are you painting? Building, sorry.
So I'm what you would call in a hobby, the old term was a hobby butterfly. So I like to jump around to like 5 projects at a time. So in the last few days, I built some Khorne Berserkers. I was working on some characters for Cities of Sigmar, some of their new models. And what was the other thing? Something else in there as well. I think some terrain the other day. So a bit of everything.
Yeah, and you're probably helped by that in the fact that you actually work at a hobby store.
Yes.
So access to models might be a little bit easier than your average person.
Yeah, it is, which is good, but also it's risky because when you see models there every day, it's pretty tempting just to like when a new model comes in, just to grab it and change your projects around. So
Yeah, that would be very dangerous for projects, wouldn't it?
dangerous for the wallet.
Are any of the new stuff for a specific project at all, like tournament or anything like that?
There's a few little ones. I was actually going to go up to CanCon in a few weeks. Initially, I'd end up not be able to make it just from work commitments, but there's a few other friends who are going up still.
Yeah.
So they're all going to play the 40k casual event. Most of them are pretty new 40k players, so they've been playing less than 3 months. So I was putting together a few lists to kind of give them some practice games. It's just a casual event, so they're meant to be kind of sillier lists. So just some, basic ones for that, 1,500 points. But the next thing for me will probably be Arc.
Yeah.
I know they've been announcing a lot of stuff. I was actually showing Dan, the organizer, the other day, about some of the different things going on there. So I'll probably be going to that, probably go for Age of Sigmar, I'd say, but we'll see. It'll probably change by then.
Yeah. It's still a few months away.
Yeah.
Arc sounds like it's just going to be huge.
Yeah.
Like just from what they were essentially just being like one of the larger 40k tournaments in Australia to now having a painting competition, Age of Sigmar. We had Kieran on. He was talking about the Zone Mortalis for
Heresy.
so
Infinity as well now. They're doing that. So,
crazy.
I used to work with Dan, who actually organises Arc now. I won't say too much, but he has some big plans over the next few years. I think he wants it to be the next big Australian tournament, rivaling CanCon and those other big ones. So
Well,
keep an eye on that over the next few years.
Maybe we'll have to get Dan on and he can tell us himself.
Yeah, so as I may have mentioned, you do work at a hobby store. You work for General Games, actually.
Yep, General Games at Churnside Park store, so just around the corner from here. So I've been the manager there. The store's been open just over a year, and I've been the manager for about the last 8 months. So I came on, so yeah.
Fantastic.
Man, it's
yeah.
been a year already.
Yeah, just over. The anniversary was end of October, I think it was. So yeah, just over a year.
That's crazy. Like I remember going and getting grilled with a couple of my hobby friends, and we went down. That's when I saw General Games, and it doesn't feel like it was a year ago.
It's been insane.
It's flown by. But yeah, we've been lucky enough, Justin, to chat with Glen and chat with the owner Ryan, and the eagle-eyed BFG fans will have noticed on all the thumbnails now, or soon to be, we'll have the presented by General Games logo on there.
Yep.
Because we've partnered with them as Battleforge Gaming, now partnering with General Games to grow this podcast and provide giveaways, and they're supporting us in that way.
Yep. So the I's haven't been dotted and the T's haven't been crossed, but it is good news for the BFG community as a whole, and I think General Games as well.
100%.
Because, I mean, after chatting with Ryan for a bit, it seems like we've got very similar goals in mind, like our
Visions and values.
Visions and
100%,
values
yeah.
align pretty well. So being able to motivate and grow the hobby community is number one.
100%. Yeah, I think the best thing you can do for any hobby, you know, obviously, whether it's tabletop mini games for us or whether you're into racing cars, fishing, whatever it is, if you can grow the community in any way, then it's a positive thing. Like, the bigger your hobby gets, the more people involved,
The more
means
fun
you
it
got,
is.
yeah, more people to play with against in this game. There's more resources then, people are making more stuff. It's just always a good thing.
100%. And yeah, on that note, like General Games being our local hobby store, as you said, it's been around for a year now. From the moment Justin and I walked in there, it was a very welcoming, clean, friendly, safe environment that we just now go to for all of our hobby stuff.
Yep.
It's that easy.
Even if it wasn't the closest hobby store, it would still be the store I'm traveling to. They do have 2 other stores, so it isn't just the Churnside Park store.
There's also Frankston and Malvern. So,
Yeah.
depending where you live out here.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, super exciting news, which we won't go into too much detail for, but on the horizon this year for Churnside Park, as you guys are moving into what's going to be called an epic level store.
Yeah, so we're moving to literally next door to what used to be the old Rivers store, if anyone knows that. It's 3 times the size. So it's, going to be great. We're going to have a bunch of wargame tables permanently set up. Obviously, we'll have lots of more tables for card gamers and those things as well. We'll be able to run some big tournaments going forward. So currently our cap for mini tourneys is like 12 players. We'll be able to run like 40-plus player events, which will be great. And, do up some cool tables and that for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very excited. I love a themed board. I put a lot of work into my miniatures, and I love putting them on a board that's got just as much love on it. It really immerses you in a game, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, there's nothing better than a game on a fully nicely painted board with beautifully painted armies.
Yeah. And having that as our local hobby store will just be such a blessing, I think. That's going to be unreal to be able to just go down to Churnside Park and have dedicated hobby tables, beautiful display tables, and obviously you and all the other friendly people down at General Games. It's going to be awesome. I'm pumped for it.
It's very exciting times. Hopefully it shouldn't be too far away. It's kind of like the worst kept secret because it hasn't officially been announced, but it pretty much has. That's
all right. I don't think anyone else will tell them.
Yeah, that'd be fun. It should be hopefully about March. So we're aiming before Easter, but obviously things can happen. So hopefully soon.
And hopefully we'll get to walk through soon around the opening time and get to show everyone what it looks like because we're very, very excited to check it out.
Well, I won't have to play on the kitchen table anymore.
Lockie will have somewhere else to go.
Oh, yeah, he'll be down there all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And from the Battleforge gaming perspective, it opens up a whole bunch of windows with this, bunch of doors with this partnership.
We can go through the window as well.
Yeah, or the window. Yep. Probably the doors are the safest. But talking about running painting classes or even doing battle reports from the store.
Yeah, 100%.
Would be just so much fun and such a cool environment to do it in. So, yeah, massive news.
Yeah, well, that was something we had thrown the idea out there with battle reports and the painting classes, but now with potentially a dedicated space. Like, again, all the details haven't been filled in, but yeah, exciting. Not having to personally paint some tables up.
Yeah, I love painting terrain, but it's a pain to store. So
Yeah.
being able to just paint stuff, take it down to the store and leave it there is...
Yeah, I was running out of room in the house anyway, let alone having to like paint up 3 or 4 boards and then be like, where do I keep all this?
Yeah.
So that pretty much covers it for our latest announcement. It's probably a good time for me to mention for those...
We might just touch on, because we haven't got all the details sorted yet, we are sorting out links for our community to be able to be directed to the website for General Games. That's going to be the best way to support both General Games and Battleforge Gaming. We'll let you guys know more once we've got it all sorted. I do have a link in our link tree for General Games website, so you can click on that, and that'll be the best way to support.
Yeah, and you'll find those links popping up all across the Battleforge Gaming socials, whether it's your personal your BFG Instagram, the Battleforge Gaming podcast Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
The website.
Yeah, the Battleforge Gaming website.
You guys are all over it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we love the social media.
I mean, you got to do it, don't you? You got to do it.
Yeah, it'd be a pretty quiet podcast if we didn't do it. But yeah, so yeah, those will be the links you can use to go to General Games, which will be fantastic because hopefully we can grow with the store and really have a really tight knit core community.
Yep.
The big thing I'm
in
hoping
store.
for is that it's not just our Victorian community. Hopefully it's the Australia-wide that would like to support General Games. You can get your stuff shipped. Obviously, you get pretty excited when it comes to pre-orders and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're willing to wait with the shipping times, that'd be cool if people could just...
Yeah.
And obviously as we grow as well, we'll be running obviously larger tournaments. So chance people if come from interstate and that once we start building up the prestige for them. So start running some both casual narrative and some more competitive events for you guys. So
And that's got to be the highlight for me for chatting to you and Ryan as well. It's just such a community focused store. Like you guys truly understand that without the community, the store wouldn't succeed.
Yeah.
And that's such a great mindset to have. And it's like instantly the first thing Ryan wanted to talk about us was the area he was going to have for the hobby tables and the gaming tables, and that just shows where the priorities are, which is really nice to see.
yeah, it's definitely a passion. Obviously, when I'll chat about kind of my background, but like I've done Warhammer a long time. Ryan's also been doing a long time. We've both worked for GW in the days, so it's something we are passionate about still. So
Yeah, fantastic.
That was a perfect segue. You segued yourself.
Yeah.
I didn't even mean to.
Yeah. So now the reason we're all really here is you, Glen. So how long you been hobbying for?
It makes me feel old. It's been about 20 years now. So I started when I was just a kid in like early high school. One of my mates from school came over to my house one day. He'd been around to the shops, Chadstone Shopping Centre it was back in the day when it was still inside there. And he showed me these models that were Space Marines, and I had no idea what they were, but I thought they were the coolest thing in the world. Ended up going down to the store, did the whole intro thing there, bought a box of Khorne Berserkers, which were the same models up until a few months ago.
Weren't they? Oh my God.
I was maybe one of the only people who was sad to see them leave because I just had nostalgia for them. But yeah,
So that was that was the first models you
first
bought?
models I ever bought were the box of the 8-man box of Khorne Berserkers that were on the shelf for years. So
Why is it always someone's friend introduces them to the hobby?
Yeah.
We've yet to speak to someone who was like, I found it by myself and I introduced all my friends to it.
yeah,
I think Alex might have been that way, but yeah, I was secondhand hobby. You were
Mark
secondhand
introduced
hobby,
me basically. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. From working at game stores, you see it. It's usually one person finds out, they just tell all their friends, they bring them all in, and you get a whole new group of people. So
Yeah, that's cool. There you go. So yeah, Khorne Berserkers.
Khorne Berserkers. So yeah, I would have been probably 12, 14 at the time. Had no idea how to paint. I'm sure they'd be horrible if I look back on them now, but
You still have some of the original stuff, or were you like me and got rid of it?
I don't have them. I do have my oldest model I still own is the Dwarf Leader from the Battle for Skull Pass, which is an old Fantasy Star set, which I actually painted up when I applied to work for Games Workshop, which was a few years later. One of my first kind of full-time jobs. Applied for Games Workshop after annoying them for a job for a few years. And they, said, paint up a model, bring it down, do a little interview. So I paint up, the dwarf character from Skull Pass, and I still have him floating around. So it's a cool little nostalgia piece I hold on to.
That is awesome. Here's my resume.
Yeah, pretty much. It was like, here's a paper resume. They don't even bother looking at it. But yeah, they looked at the model, and I remember the kind of interview process still. You kind of do a fake intro game, tend to run people through and that. So
cool.
It's a fun interview.
They're testing your understanding of the game.
100%. It's an interesting company to work for. So
there you go. That's
Interesting.
yeah, it is. It's weird. They get a bad rep. I'm going to be honest. I worked there. I was pretty young. I started working there full time when I was 19. I worked there for about 6 years. I was pretty young. Maybe I was naive, but it was a great company to work for back then. So yeah. You do all your day was doing hobbies. So can't ask for something much better, really.
Did you, when you got those Corn Berserkers, were you painting them up to play your mate, basically? Was that pretty much?
At the time, to be honest, didn't really know too much about the game. We kind of played a bit. This would have been probably 3rd edition, I think it would have been. Maybe 4th. But yeah, we kind of didn't know the rules too much. We didn't want to go out and buy books. We just wanted to play the game. So we kind of did an intro game. I think we ended up making up most of the rules ourselves. So it would have been a horrible mess.
People still do that now.
100%.
At tournaments. I've seen it. They make their stuff up.
It's great. But yeah, we played some games, but we definitely made a mess of the rules. It was more just, for us, it wasn't about being competitive or anything. It was just about having fun with friends.
Cool.
I think that's just the thing that still sticks with me today. I've been to lots of tournaments. I've placed well at some. I've gone shocking at others. I've won a few painting awards, different things. But at the end of the day, it's the fun of just hanging out, chatting with like-minded people. So, yeah.
100%. Not too dissimilar to what we're doing right now.
100%.
Yeah.
But
the social aspect, that's what it's about.
Especially as you get older, I think, when it's harder to chat to people. Having a hobby where you can just sit there and talk and, paint at the same time or play a game as well, it's just great. So,
yeah, fantastic. And then, so you obviously continued the hobby from that point?
Obviously started when I was about 14, played kind of pretty consistently, or collected at least, bought lots of models, painted them shockingly, played the odd game here or there, continued doing that, had a few friends I kind of met throughout it, kind of went into later high school, I was able to do a bit more, kind of did it for probably about 5 years, and, finished school, did a few bits, some casual jobs, came time to get, a full-time job, and thought, what better place to go than Games Workshop? I knew all the staff. I went there pretty frequently. Ended up chatting to them. They were looking at the time. Ended up working at the Melbourne store, what used to be in Melbourne Central. Started there kind of about 2009-ish when I would have been about 19. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, yeah, you fell in love with the hobby that much that you're like,
100%.
if I'm going to have to work somewhere every day, why not where I spend all my time?
Jump all the way, deep hole, jump all the way in. So
yeah. That's fantastic. Did you find prior to working for Games Workshop that you were so involved in the hobby anyway that you were just naturally growing a group of hobbyists around you?
A little bit. I found for me personally, it was a bit hard for me to get to places. So I couldn't go to really clubs. I'd go to the store, but mainly just to play games. I didn't really. I didn't really go to play many games. I do the odd event, but. It was very casual. I mainly just did it with friends at my house or their house.
Yeah.
I wasn't super involved with the community kind of aspect. It wasn't really till I started working for Games Workshop that I got a bit more involved, started going to tournaments and really getting involved in the community and clubs and that kind of thing.
Yeah, nice one. And then when you got into Games Workshop, did that change your perspective on the hobby at all? Being right in the center of it?
It does a bit. When you're doing it every day, obviously you can get, you love it, it's awesome. You can get a bit burnt out sometimes and, talking about it all the time. But I think most people coming in are also excited. So it kind of keeps your energy up.
You can feed off that.
100%.
That excitement.
And it was a bit different back then. Now, obviously, Games Workshop's gone to kind of the one-man stores, at least in Australia. So you kind of, I don't know if I'd like to work there now where you're spending a lot of time by yourself. Back then, there was always a few people on. They were busy. These were in, shopping centre days. So it was always busy. I remember back in Chadstone during Christmas, there'd be days where you'd run 40 different kids through an intro game of how to play it. So it kept you always, excited and passionate about the hobby. And back then as well, there was also you had to do a lot of painting for the store. So we had what was called back then with black boxes. So then they just do a release once a month. It's not the weekly releases you see now. It's a bit more chill. So once a month you get this black box, just a cardboard box, which would have all the new releases in. So you'd pretty much have to crack it open and paint all these models. So it was great because you got to paint all the new stuff. If you weren't overly interested in new stuff, it wasn't as exciting.
Yeah.
And obviously you had some pretty hard deadlines, but it was still painting models. You're still having fun. So
Yeah, that's cool.
Did doing that part of the job, painting the black boxes, did that take away from your own hobby, or were you still motivated to do your own stuff?
It definitely it goes in ebbs and flows. So if I had an event on or something like that where I was excited for, I'd still be keen. Sometimes, especially if there was a big release like starter sets, were usually the killer part. Obviously, they had lots of models in.
Yeah.
I remember when I think it was a Battle of Skull Pass came out of one of those old fancy ones. There was like 110 models in this box. So that takes a while to get through, and those can certainly burn you out a bit. But yeah, as I said, back then, because you had a few staff, you could break it up a bit. And
Yeah, it wasn't a one-man store having to paint
yeah, it was a bit of a different feel back then. So
the Leviathan box.
yeah, doing them solos, a whole different thing. So, but yeah, it definitely gets you quick at painting as well. So you kind of learn before speed paints were a thing like that, you kind of had to learn how to speed paint. So
Yeah.
how to just do quick highlights on models. How to get them to a good playable standard, make him look kind of box art like as quick as possible. So
Yeah. Was that eye-opening for you, that style of
it was
painting?
like I was not a great painter before I started. Like I said, back then there was no one doing it professionally. You didn't really have YouTubers who spend 12 hours a day painting that you could watch and learn from. So if you want to learn, you had to just do it yourself. You had like White Dwarf had their little guides, but they were hit or miss. And like even the paints themselves, like back when I started, the Citadel range was about the only range of paints you could get.
Yeah,
and they had like 80 paints.
And the quality varied.
Yeah, 100%. Like I grew up with the old inks, the shiny ones that were like had the black lids, and even some of the old ones are white screw top lids that you put that on a model and just make it shiny.
Yeah.
It wouldn't really do anything.
Yeah.
So compared to now, where it's just so easy to paint, like with contrast and all the speedways, airbrushing's everywhere now. You can knock up an army in a weekend now, whereas back then you had to do it, the basic way of put a base coat down, wash it, panel it, highlight it, and it's just a slow process. So, and a lot of the paints were just thin, so you'd have to do lots of coats. So,
Mike's just
I'm just like, this is just describing Justin's process to a T. I was like,
and even like there weren't many brands of paint around. Like it was just Citadel. You could maybe find a bit of Tamiya stuff, but they were hard. That was about it. So now if you don't like a Citadel paint, you can go and find a Vallejo paint.
Yeah.
Or an
So
army
many.
painter, or there's 20 different ones. So you can always find a paint you need now. Whereas back then it was just that was what you had, especially painting stuff for the store. You could only use the Games Workshop paint, obviously. So trying to paint it to their standard with their tools and all that could definitely be tricky sometimes.
yeah.
But you definitely improved my painting. It's why I'm now a pretty competent painter is definitely having to paint every day. You get good. So
Yeah. I guess you get used to that quantity of painting as well, I guess.
Yes.
So you would have such a high level, like you wouldn't particularly. I couldn't imagine you getting overwhelmed after dealing with something like that.
No, it was interesting. I went to a Horus Heresy tournament like 3 months ago. Could absolutely smash it. Went horrible, but had an army. I painted Imperial Fist army, and I painted the army in about a week.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't want to brag or anything. It looked decent. It's pretty quick and easy. It's using airbrush and contrast paints over zenithols and that. But got a lot of compliments for it. And I think the thing was I looked at it as just a single kind of model almost. I went, I had 40 odd guys, but I kind of sort of went, cool, I'll just batch paint them. And I'm used to doing that style where I can knock out 10 Marines is fine. I'm not going to paint a single model one at a time. So painting, even a 3,000 point Heresy army wasn't as daunting as would be for most people. So.
Yeah, I'm anxious just thinking about having to paint 3,000 points.
So you kind of, I guess mentally it helps. Like, I look at that and like it was a big army. It was about 40 Marines. I think it was 10 Termies in there. I think I had like 7 tanks. So like it was a decent army, but using airbrushes and contrast paints do half your work anyway. And I was able to get it done to a pretty competent standard in a short time. Just kind of approaching it like that.
I just feel like chat might be laughing at me because I spend 5 days painting a single Marine.
Yeah.
And Glen's like, I just painted 3,000 points in a week.
Yeah, I'm definitely a speed painter. I've played a few back against Justin back in the days of playing games at the Ringwood Games Workshop back before COVID times when you could play the little tournaments he used to run there.
Yeah.
Often I'd kind of knock up an army in a few weeks. So yeah, definitely, yeah, speed painting can help once you learn a few tricks and just kind of accept where to spend the time and where you can kind of skip. So
Well, you can see that in the general game store in Churnside Park.
yeah,
Majority of the armies, if not all of them,
I think all of them currently. Yeah.
are your armies in the cabinets. So we were there, not yesterday, the day before. So yeah, we're just like, is that yours? And you're like, yep. Is that yours?
Yeah,
Yep.
some of them are quite old to be fair. So like, there's a few armies where there's a bit of a joke in the store. We've got one of our young casuals. She's only 16. There's a few armies in the cabinet that are actually older than her. So it makes me feel a bit old. But yeah, when you do the hobby long enough, you end up with lots of armies. So
It's experienced.
yeah,
Experienced. No, that's crazy.
Hey, I get called dad on stream, so
yeah.
I feel that.
Usually it's from guys that are the same age as you.
Maybe.
No.
Yeah, you become a veteran of the hobby after you do it long enough as well. So, and it also, I think it's a thing. Like I've done it for 20 odd years. I've done it pretty consistently for most of that time. So there's been very few times I've had more than 6 months away from the hobby. We'll go on to even after I left Games Workshop. I kind of decided to leave there. Went to uni for a bit. Ended up getting a job at another game store, another independent store where I worked for about 6 years. And the whole time I was kind of the main Warhammer person there. So again, painting stuff for them and doing all that and kind of being heavily involved still in the community. So it's, pretty much for the last, majority of the last 20 years, I've been pretty actively involved throughout it. So,
Which is pretty amazing when you think about it, to be that consistent with the hobby for that amount of time is pretty unheard of, because obviously life, like Juddy's mentioned before in previous episodes, life can really get in the way, and the hobby's often the first thing to go.
yeah, it is. I think I've been pretty lucky. My partner's always been supportive of it, which helps. Even like I've got a 4-year-old daughter, so obviously that can take a lot of time. But I'm still able to, sneak in some painting when she goes to bed and do little bits here and there to find time when you can. Even after I left that independent store, I ended up just working at the Ringwood, what's now the Warhammer store, as just a casual, just kind of helping out there. So kind of always able to keep fairly involved. I think one of the good parts about working for Games Workshop is they do train you really well. So kind of, it's that thing, once you've worked there, you can kind of work any retail job and you have a really good base of knowledge, so you can kind of step in and do a good job. So yeah.
So your core like customer service skills and stuff like that
Yeah,
that they teach
100%. Like anyone who works in retail, if you're a manager and you're looking at hiring someone, they've worked at Games Workshop, it's usually a pretty good place. So yeah, they train their staff very well. So
That's fantastic. There's you mentioned your 4-year-old daughter. Have you shown the hobby?
she's seen bits and pieces.
Interested in that yet?
She's well, my partner as well is also very hobby focused. She's very into sewing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So our daughter's pretty much surrounded by hobbies of various types 24/7. So if it's not painting, it'll be sewing or something else. So
She's got options.
100%. So she's definitely keen on everything. She loves art and drawing. So I'm sure once she gets a little bit older, she'll be picking up a paintbrush. So
Yeah.
I have to start teaching her young, try and get into those, junior painting contests and that.
Yeah.
So
Whatever project you're working on at the time.
yeah, maybe I won't have to worry about painting my infantry. I'll just get her to do the boring parts. I can just worry about the characters.
That's
So
it. Perfect. That's why you have kids, right?
exactly, free labor.
You could learn something from this, Justin.
Me? I don't think I have to worry about that.
Yeah. So after was Games Workshop sort of your first time when you started looking into the tournament scene, the gaming,
pretty
the gaming
much.
side of it?
So when I was at Games Workshop, obviously started looking at tournaments. I worked with Dan, who I mentioned earlier, who runs ARC. He was a very active tournament player. He's got a big name. The other guys I was working with also are pretty active. So it's kind of through them I got into it more. I was never a diehard tournament player. I always liked running thematic lists and more silly stuff. But yeah, I did obviously start attending tournaments pretty regularly, kind of tried to get to one every 3 months at least.
Wow.
Kind of then started helping run some as well. Just as people needed help because they knew I've done a bit before and was kind of involved, I just jump in, whether it be helping on a day, paint, like doing painting scores and that kind of thing I did a fair bit of, or comp scores with army lists, or just kind of helping a bit of painting beforehand, getting tables ready and that kind of thing. So
Nice.
yeah, it was kind of lucky that I met a lot of people who run events and were great, so I was able to help them really. So
Was it, looking back to those first days in the tournament scene, was it, I can only imagine because I'm only coming back into it recently, Was it a pretty tight knit crew of who regularly showed up and who organised it?
It's a bit like you look at some of the smaller games. So like I've also played virtually every model game that's come out over the last little while. So games like Infinity and War Machine and all those other ones I've kind of tried. I think back 15 years ago, Warhammer was more like those because it didn't have the mass appeal it does now. You don't have people like Henry Cavill talking about it on giant YouTube channels and that. So like it wasn't as well known. So it was a bit more tight knit. I think there's a lot less people who actually ran events. It was kind of the same people who ran the same events every year. So like Arc famously had the same group of guys who ran it every year for like 10 odd years. And you see the same thing for the other tournaments. It'll be the same guys running the events over and over. A bit of like an old guard kind of feel.
Yeah.
Whereas now a lot of other people have kind of jumped in and stepped up, which has been awesome because there's just so many people doing it now. So.
Well, at some point, someone was going to have to step up. You can't be running the same tournament 10 years in a row.
Yeah, that's it. And like it was kind of a bit of, I think, a few of the older guys kind of just aged out of it, which you just see in all games. Like I've seen as well, working game stores with card games as well. You always need to be recruiting new people, and you got lots of new people who were excited and wanted to help grow the hobby. Like in my opinion, the best thing you can do for any hobby is just grow it.
Yeah.
If you can inspire others and help it grow, like it's just a win. So
Yeah, totally. Do you have? I've actually wanted to ask a few people this since doing the podcast.
Do you want to ask me?
No, I know.
You're not that important.
I know you're happy place. I was just wondering, do you have like a go-to unit that you love to paint?
don't know about unit. Usually I like the kind of chunkier infantry. So things like Terminators. They're usually my go-tos because like they're just fun in games. They're usually good for armies because they chew up your points pretty well. You can have a bit of fun with them. They've usually got lots of detailing. So in terms of, from my background, in terms of speed painting, you can usually paint them pretty quickly to a good level because they have enough. There's not too many open surfaces where you kind of can get exposed by doing quick techniques. It's not like, these Imperial Knights, if you leave those shoulder pads blank, they're going to look a bit dull. Whereas Termies, you can get away with doing those kind of things, like speed painting them to a level and still make him look really good. And just fun, like big, chunky dudes that just cool on a tabletop. So
Yeah, that's...
What about me?
I know yours. Yours is a Space Marine.
No.
Intercessor.
Mine's a battle line. I love battle line, yeah. Almost any army with battle line. So whether it's intercessors or assault intercessors for Space Marines, if I was to do Tyranids, I really like Termagants and Hormagaunts. There's just something that I like about your stock standard battle line, which is weird because I spend so long painting models. You'd be like, why don't you like the elite units like Glen? I love battle line.
Battle line, it's honestly the best answer. If you like battle line, then you'll like painting anything because usually that's the part which new players always want to get him. Like I've obviously been working with new players for 15 odd years. The part that they always they'll buy their army, they'll paint up that first character, and then they'll look at that sea of grey infantry, and that's the part where they're always like, I don't want to do this. Yeah.
It can be very intimidating, but just I don't know, something about your stock standard guy. Often think they get overlooked,
underrated.
There used to have to build a formation, which is something I want to chat about later. You used to have to build around your battle line. You had to take minimum of your battle line. You don't need to do that whatsoever. And they get overlooked even more. But quite often they've got really, really good rules. In this edition, you get more objectives secured on your battle line troops. So the game is about objectives and getting victory points. So if you've got your battle line near an objective, most of the time you're going to hold it. So, and intercessors, they have sticky, very underrated rule.
Yeah.
So
it's one of the things I think you've seen. I'll jump forward a bit, but in game design, definitely now you've seen to move away from mandatory battle line units. Even they bring it back a little bit with the new Old Hammer, the Warhammer Fantasy reboot kind of thing. But back in the day of Old Fantasy, you had to have a certain percentage of your army had to be battle line. So I think it was like 25% and stuff. You only have X amount of rarer stuff. I think they've kind of realised now, games actually I should say when I say this, but most people like the big fancy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's why they've moved away from that so you can run a whole army of Dreadnoughts or Sanguinary Guard or whatever you want to do. So
yeah, who are they to stop you buying the more expensive stuff?
Yeah.
well, it's work.
Damn.
It's work for them. So
100%. So
yeah. I mean, aesthetically and thematically, limiting people to running X amount of battle line would make sense. But then, from a business perspective, and then people do what they want. So
yeah, it's interesting. Like you read obviously all the books like about Space Marines. They have these well constructed armies with formations, And you look at an army on a table, and it's usually the polar opposite. So
Yeah, yeah. It's just whatever the person likes the look of, which is, that's the hobby.
They may have prevented people from having to take them, but it hasn't prevented them from putting intercessors in every combat patrol box they have.
That's true. They still have to sell them.
You may not want them, but you're going to have some.
Yeah, they spend the money on making the sprues. I remember back in the day, saying how much back in the day. I remember the sprues used to apparently cost $1 million to make. A new kit was a number they used to throw around.
The press or whatever it was.
By the time they make the press and the molds, and I'm sure paying for all the artists to design them. So I mean, you got to sell them.
They'll make their money back in Australia for sure.
Yeah, the Australia tax is a thing for our international listeners.
And I mean, obviously the hobby's progressed in such a way that it's just massive now. Like you touched on earlier, like guys like Henry Cavill and people promoting the hobby that you never would have thought. And
I remember it was a few years back, like when I was working there. So even when I was leaving it towards the end, so it would have been like 2012 kind of thing. There was rumors of celebrities who'd play it. So I remember there was a rumor of so there was a few kind of big names, Robin Williams and that, and a few kind of celebrities who were rumored to play. I remember once or twice we had some bands come in when I was working in a Melbourne store. It's a few usually metal bands and that would come into the store when they were touring and around Melbourne would buy stuff, and it was this big event. And now, you have people like Henry Cavill, like Ed Sheeran in one of his music videos. There's some like fire warriors and stuff. Like you just see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, they made their way to South Park.
Yeah, it's on South Park. It was in The Last of Us, the video game. There was like a little painting studio set up at one of the levels. So, yeah.
Must have missed that. I've played that game. That's so good.
Yeah, it's a little Easter egg nod in there. So.
That's awesome.
It's sort of only just the beginning too, because I feel like once Henry Cavill, and we're chatting about it a lot. So Henry, if you do hear this podcast, by all means, get in contact with us. Once that series or movie or whatever it is going to be on Amazon gets released and it starts to get pushed to the public, not just hobbyists themselves, because like it's getting funded fairly well. So you imagine it's going to be a quality series. That is just going to increase how many people come into the hobby, because it's something that we've seen more and more, I guess, with pop culture, comics. Marvel movies became the thing. People went to see Marvel movies that weren't into comics at all when they were younger. But now all of a sudden, Marvel's cool, DC's cool. And now it's not that far off where Warhammer is going to be considered cool.
Yeah. You look at things like, The Witcher or Game of Thrones, how huge they are.
Yeah.
And also the Warhammer video game. So, Total War's huge. The new Space Marine game.
It's going to be massive.
That's going to be nuts.
Yeah. That's probably a good time to talk about.
Another segue.
They just keep coming. Yeah. It's super smooth. How the hobby has changed since you first started, because you're one of our few guests that's been around it for so long, which is super impressive. The sort of customers and things you'd have coming now, do you find that it's really, you've got guys that are
You're dancing around this a little bit, aren't you?
I'm trying to think, because I'm
doesn't want to do a spicy comment.
No. It's not that. It was more just is it more of a mainstream hobby now? Like the people you're coming in
varied.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually. I think the ratio is actually pretty similar.
Yeah.
So you'll see the same ratios of young kids playing older guys. A bit of the same kind of ratios. It's just more. Obviously there are some more veterans now because people have just grown up with it. So people who started playing when they were teenagers or in their 20s are now older and they've got kids. They're starting to get them in. But it's still, you'll still see those older guys. There'll still be kids. I think it's still a pretty wide variety of people. So I don't think the demographic has changed that much.
Yeah.
I think a lot more people know about it. So again, working in independent game stores, we get a lot of people coming in, for games like Magic, the card game Magic Gathering, or Pokemon, those kind of things. Back in the day, they'd walk past the Warhammer aisle and they'd be like, "What's this?" Whereas now they'll come in for their card games, guys who've never, played or seen Warhammer, but they'll at least know what it is. They'll walk past and be like, Space Marines.
Yeah.
They'll know what they are.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think that's the main thing. But I think demographically, it's not that different, at least in the areas that I've seen. So in Melbourne.
So it's more about quantity as opposed to who's buying this.
100%. And like I said, there's more tournaments, and the tournaments are just bigger. So like, in Australia we'll get 200 plus player tournaments. Ark's 200 players. Age of Sigma at CanCon they hit 220 odd players and sell out in like a day. So you'll just see those huge numbered events and just people desperate, especially, I think the bigger factor's probably been COVID over the last few years. Once that ended, I think COVID saw a real boom in people painting, and then now it's ended, you're seeing a real boom in people wanting to play events. They want to get out there and do things now.
And looking back at those first tournaments you're involved in, what sort of numbers would you think?
Back then, if you got 40 people, you'd be pretty happy. 60 would be huge. So, and now, like I said, that Heresy event I played in a few months back, like Heresy is a smaller game system. It had, I think it was 40-ish people, but that sold out in 2 hours.
Yeah, so it's getting 40 easily.
Yeah, it's not even trying. Like, if it had a larger venue and, obviously more time and resource for the TOs, they could have got 60 people, and still sold out in 24 hours.
Yeah, which is, I guess for you looking back, that's like unheard of back then.
Yeah, you'd see a few like ones that would sell out, but these wouldn't be that quick. And you see just the amount of tournaments as well. Like even a lot of game stores now, like obviously we're going to a larger space so we can run more tournaments. You just see other, independent stores as well who run events and just kind of things like leagues and that as well. The ones that don't have as much room, you'll see leagues or things like that where they can use the smaller play space but keep it going. So like our Melbourne store run a lot of leagues and they'll get 40 plus people in the league. They don't have the room for that many people, but when you stagnate it out over a few days, they're able to do it. So
yeah, and has that changed? Like, were the first independent stores you're at, were they still running leagues and tournaments?
You generally see it. So Melbourne.
There wasn't that demand for it, or
I think
mainly pickup games.
Yeah, there was a lot more pickup games. A lot of stores back then just didn't have the room or the tables. It's so much easier now to make a table of terrain. There's better terrain out there, and 3D printing obviously also helps. So a lot of places just didn't have the terrain or the room, whereas it's kind of become a bigger thing now. So
I feel like social media's probably played a large part in that. It's easier to just get in contact with a group of people. We just make a Discord, like the Battleforge Gaming Discord, and you can just get a group together that it's easy to just message and be like, yo, it's my league game this weekend. Someone want to meet up?
Yeah.
Whereas it used to be a lot harder.
Yeah. It's like even since Facebook, like just being able to be like message a friend and be like, hey, let's go to that local store. Back when I was a kid, if I wanted to have a game at a Games Workshop, I'd have to call my friend, try and organize it. You'd have to talk to the store to make sure there was room. It was a lot more effort. So yeah.
It's definitely the social media side of things obviously has grown the hobby as well. You see it, you have people on your TikTok coming in and they may have, like you said, they may have heard of Warhammer now, but then they actually get to see someone actually doing it live in front of them.
The fantastic thing about when I do my lives is, and I take it as a compliment, is when I get people in that haven't seen it before and then they hang around in stream.
Yeah.
And then they come back to another stream. So
amazing.
It's it is the type of hobby where if you've never seen it before, it can grab your interest pretty damn fast.
It's pretty different.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing, like going back to what you're saying about how it's changed. I think from a game point of view, it hasn't really. Like every edition we see changes. Some editions troops will be better and others they won't be. Vehicles will go from good and bad. It always kind of rotates. Like I've played 7 editions of 40k now. Same with, Fantasy when I played that and all the other games. Like there's always the ebbs and flows and then new books come out and all that. But the game, I think, hasn't changed that much. The biggest change has hands down been the painting. Like that's a part which exploded. Like back in the day, as I said, there was a few websites, back when Cool Mini or Not was just the website and people could post their cool photos and you see those stunning, the Golden Demon and like all those photos that were amazing. That was about it. That was the only way you'd really see painting. Whereas now you go on social media and there's just painting everywhere.
Yeah.
It's so easy. Like I was saying to Justin earlier, like it's about the easiest time in the world to get into painting, but it's also the hardest and most overwhelming time because there's just thousands of paints. There's different brands.
It's that echo chamber we're also talking about where if you start up your Instagram for your hobby and you've started painting, then obviously you're going to get fed into the algorithm. So there's going to be like, you like Warhammer stuff.
Yeah.
Here's Warhammer stuff. But a lot of the time they're just like, here's the 1% of dudes that are like majority heavy metal team and then the guys that are potentially going to be the heavy metal team. And that's what you're getting fed, which in itself is fantastic because they're really, really good to learn from. But it is also, it is that. It's why we say don't compare yourself to other people. It is the thief of joy. It can be intimidating seeing models painted that well, but everyone needs to start at the beginning.
It's interesting. Like I get people coming in every day, and obviously they look at the models I paint in the store, and they'll say, obviously they say they're great and everything. Like I've won a fair few painting awards, but I look at mine and compare them to, like I look at someone like Vinci V online or Miniac or those kind of guys, and it's another level. Like I compare myself to them, and I might as well be finger painting my models. It's just insane the difference in skill, but everyone you always look up to other people, and it's just you kind of have to balance. You want to aspire to get there, but you have to be realistic.
Use it as inspiration.
Yeah.
Just never use it as a comparison. Use it as an inspiration.
That's it.
Pick out the parts you like from the models. Ask them questions. We've said it multiple times. Be polite. Ask them questions. They'll more than often than not they'll help you out.
Yeah, I think I always tell people the reason I've got to this level is I've been doing it for 20 years. If you do anything for 20 years, like if I was just to sit there kicking a soccer ball for 20 years, I'd be great at soccer. But, it's one of those things, the more you do it, the better you get. So
that's it. You make a lot of money playing golf, guys. Pick up golf now.
Yeah, so that's definitely, I think, something you've talked about with this stream is sticking to it and the consistency, not getting discouraged. Like,
don't be disheartened.
It's so easy, like you said now, Glenn, it's so easy to see all the great work, all the great artists out there painting their models, and you might paint your first model and be like, oh, this looks nothing like that. It looks terrible.
But you don't see that 20 years that Glenn's put in to get where he's at.
Yeah. Exactly.
All you see is the model that's on Instagram of that fantastic painter.
Yeah.
You don't see all the models they painted before that. And then, quite often than not, some pretty shoddy models early on.
There's a lot of, even I'll still paint models today where I'll try something new and it'll just turn out awful. Like I've actually recently trying to get into bust painting. So something I'm trying to challenge myself to do is look at doing crimson brush, which is kind of like another painting contest we have in Australia. And it's
part of CanCon?
Yeah, just part of CanCon, and now coming down for ARC as well. They're the guys doing the painting stuff at ARC. And a lot of the work is bust painting because obviously bust got the larger size. And a lot of the skills I'm pretty competent at just don't scale well to bust. You can't get away doing tricks like dry brushing out. Like if you're wet blending slightly off, it just looks really obvious. And it almost feels like starting again. It's one of those it's been really fun for me because I almost feel like a beginner again. I've been watching, intro to bust painting videos. I can really feel how kind of new painters feel again, which has been great fun. So,
how was that like when you'd have? Because obviously when you're working for GW, you'd have to run, or you had to have some kind of introductory painting system and stuff like that in place.
Yeah, so they still even do that today. So if you go into a GW store, they'll have like a little painting station set up, and they've got now these big kind of boards which have a picture of a Space Marine and a Stormcast Eternal on it, and the steps to do it. It's usually I think it's 4 or 6 steps. And it goes through from doing your base coat, doing a wash. I think they may have highlighting on there now. It's the real kind of the things you start with, you want to start learning when you're starting to paint. So, it's they know what they're doing at this point. So they know how to teach people how to paint. You look at the old Duncan videos, they're very formulaic, but they work and they're good for those new players. So
yeah, and what was it like? Like, how were the responses from the customers, like the kids and the people coming in?
It's great. It's one of my favorite parts of hobby is like teaching new people. Even like other hobbies I do, I always just love teaching new people and getting them involved. So like, even now, general games in the school holidays, we always run little learn to paint sessions for the kids. It's one of my favorite things to do every few months because you get to impart your skills and what I've done and see these new players, these new painters, and like even from the start of their model to the end of it. So you'll start by getting them to paint the whole model blue or green, whatever they want to do. And they always start by missing parts. It's always the same parts around the ankles. But by the end, you'll get them to do the eyes, and they always, when you go, all right, you're going to paint the eye, they always get a bit intimidated. You can see in their face just be like, I can't do that. But then you'll get them to do it, and they'll get a bit everywhere. That's fine. You'll get them to clean it up, and they'll look at it at the end with just like joy and like from where they started, half an hour earlier, they'll never think they could actually achieve that result. But in half an hour you can learn something like that. So it's just great fun to do. So
have you stumbled across like a little Darren Latham? Is there one? Is there one been and you just been like, hang on?
There's been a few. There's been a few where I've just taught them, and like I'm like, at this point they could be teaching me. Like it's just they'll have it all down. They'll be like, oh, we'll get you to do the eyes, and they'll nail it. They won't get any paint on the arm or anything. It's like, all right, you're done. You go buy your army. Here's a flyer for Golden Demon. Go into that. You get them from time to time. So yeah.
I'd be interested to see. It'd be funny to see them like progress in the hobby.
I'd love
Because
to,
I'm
yeah.
assuming they're probably like 12, 13-year-olds.
Usually we get a few older ones, but usually they're the ones like we see, the 12-year-old who'll pull out that they'll, you get them through the armor trim on the Space Marine shoulder pad and they'll perfectly nail it. And they'll work out how to hold the brush, you hold it sideways, not straight on, like all those little tricks that take most people years, they'll be picking up. And you're always excited to see where they can kind of go. So
It'd be funny to see them when they're like 21
yeah,
if they continue it.
It's interesting because like there's a lot of, in the last 5-10 years, there's a lot of sports and hobbies that have really blown up with kids starting at a young age, and
Yep.
there's so many resources out there for them to learn that hobby at a young age. By the time they get to our age, the level's just next
gonna be
tier.
amazing. Yeah.
So yeah, it'll happen to Warhammer as well. Like there's going to be a generation of kids coming up.
It's happening now. There's a guy on Instagram that I follow. I think it's Jacob Paints. I think he's 22.
yeah.
He might as well work for heavy metal. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, I remember seeing, I think it was a YouTube video of one of the big YouTubers. They got a bunch of commission stuff painted, and one of them's done by, this young kid, and it looks stunning. And it's just like, back in the day, I remember there was a kind of running joke back when I worked at Games Workshop, in the 2010s kind of time. They'd always look at, like, Spain to where the hobby's going to go next. They were always, like, ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Where's that? Spain?
Europeans.
Yeah, European, in particular Spain. Like, all the
Yeah.
Spanish painters, they were just always just kind of, like, a little bit ahead of the curve. Like, they started doing the, like, source lighting before the rest of the world did. And now, like, you look at these young kids and they're going to be the future of the hobby. Like, you just see them with all the resources at their fingertips, how far they're going to take the hobbies. Going to be amazing to see.
Yeah. It's going to be tough out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a running joke I have with one of my friends. I've got a golden demon from a long time ago. It was a bronze in a staff category, so it means absolutely nothing. But it's a joke. If I, enter those kind of models now, you'd get laughed at. Like models that I painted back then that I could enter into a golden demon and get, looked at. If you enter it now, it's just, you wouldn't even get a chance. Like
People
the
think
level of
you're crazy.
painting has just come so far
Yeah.
that it's something else. Like even you look at some of the stunning golden demons from 15 years ago, and like that's just your average entry now. It's just stunning. So
I remember Justin talking about the box art from 10, 15 years ago and just
Dark Vengeance.
yeah,
saying how different that it would be.
Yeah, from the box art when I started 6th edition Dark Vengeance, which is what I aspired to paint like, to what it is now is vastly different. And there are so many painters that paint to the level of what the Dark Vengeance was. And, it's not something I thought I would ever get to that point. Like, I knew I wanted to improve as a hobbyist and I was going to put in the work to paint, but I didn't know what my ceiling was as a hobbyist, as a painter. So I exceeded what the Dark Vengeance box was in terms of quality. So it's just one of those things, that intimidation factor, once you get over it and get a little bit of confidence just to try some stuff, you don't know what you're capable of doing until
100%.
you attempt it.
yeah, and just those try different models too. Just try different things. Like if you're feeling a bit burnout painting one style, pick up a random model you'd never paint and just do something way out there. And like it doesn't really matter if you ruin it. Just try it and you'll learn something.
You might find techniques you're better at. Obviously,
100%.
my bread and butter is my edge highlights of Space Marines, so I focus on them. I don't tend to go towards the organic orcs or Tyranids too much because I know what I'm comfortable with and what my skills, I guess, are strongest. So
Yeah, I found that when I was playing at Games Workshop for their stuff, it was a very box art style. So it was your base coat, wash, highlights, all that. Whereas nowadays I paint very differently. I do a lot more dirty paint jobs. I use lots of effects and that kind of thing. And you'll find you might end up just changing the way you paint because you prefer painting as well. Like it might not be that you're great at it, but you might be quicker. You might just enjoy it more. So
Yeah, that's probably a great
find
point to
your
touch on.
style.
There's so many different styles now to do the hobby in. You don't have to stick with one. There's probably a myriad of friggin' names that I wouldn't even know. But yeah, grim dark, like heavy metal.
Make your own style.
Yeah.
There's people out there making their own style. Like you see it on Instagram. Christian's paint studio, I think. The king of textures. Like he does a lot of lines on, and he picks models that suit it. So he's got like Kernoth Hunters. He does a lot of like timber lining on. Dave Colwell with his like micro dotting on his stuff. So there's people out there developing their own style as well. It's not just like the existing styles. Doesn't mean you can't make your own style and be known for that style.
Well, I mean, the master of it was Blanche. Like, he was the one who, when everyone else was doing clean styles, he was the one who went out and did these bizarre paint schemes that were just using weird scratchy effects. And like, obviously the guy was a stunning artist and did some incredible stuff, but like, it wasn't seen. And you know, if he entered one of those models into a painting contest, it would have been kind of laughed at. But like, it was such a cool, unique style that it became loved, and like people started copying it and doing these really messy, out there styles that looked like nothing people had seen. And he became, you know, a cult hero because of it. So
Yeah, definitely. That's the beautiful part about this hobby with the art side of things. It does have that subjectiveness to it. It is so like beauty is in the eye of the beholder type of thing.
There is no right or wrong.
Yeah.
There is your hobby, and if people tell you how to do your own hobby, like, I'm not going to swear on stream, but tell them where to go. Honestly, if you want help to paint a certain way, that's fantastic. Ask people. But if someone is literally coming to you and saying you're doing this wrong, you're not.
Yep.
You're doing it the way you want to do it. If you're putting chapter icons where a codex doesn't put chapter icons, that is fine. That is your hobby. Enjoy your hobby.
100%. But you see it a lot, from an old memory, a young kid we used to have who came in when I was working at the Ringwood Warhammer store for a bit, who had he was playing a Catachan army back when they had rules in a day, and his version of Sly Marbo, because he didn't have a model at the time, he just had a Catachan arm sticking up through what he glued a rhino just turret, one of the little holes on the top, hatch, that's what, onto a base, and just had a Catachan arm sticking out of it. And he thought it was the coolest thing in the world. He thought it was this great conversion, and it became infamy in the store. There was this great character who just like appear anywhere, take a shot with his gun that we made up the rules, and it was practically a las cannon. And it was this little las gun, but it might as well have been a las cannon. He just, pop up, shoot a vehicle in the back, disappear again. And this little thing, this kid would have been 12. And it was the coolest thing in the world to him. And they're the things you love to see. So
That's sick. I'll look out for that in 11th edition.
yeah, he'd probably in his 30s now, that kid. So hopefully he still has it.
Look out for Sly Marbo. He's got some good rules. He's got some good rules.
Yeah, that's so we've probably touched on it a bit now, but how has like Warhammer? You said it hasn't changed a whole lot. Like, it's still the same game, but how have the editions changed over the years that you've been playing? Do you think is it still like? Has the gaming system changed?
It changes a lot and not a lot at the same time. It's going to be like, there's always changes. Like, one army will go from being the top army, tanks will be the meta this edition. Then next edition will be infantry.
So for that, that's a good example. I mean, the thing is, Games Workshop's a company.
Yep.
And they need to sell models, right? So in order to sell the same models to the person that's already got those models, it can be as simple as being the battle cannon on the Lehman Russ is no longer the go-to weapon. It's now that, I think it's the Eradicator or something. Like, it can be as simple as changing a weapon enabled to change what the meta is in certain armies.
100%. And it's not just Games Workshop as well. As long as you've played lots of games, you say the same thing in every game.
Yeah.
And there's editions people love and hate, and always when a new edition gets announced, there's a bunch of people who'll jump online and burn their armies, and the world's falling. And 2 months later, everyone loves the game. So even big changes, I mean, Age of Sigmar was probably the biggest one I've ever seen, where it went from the old fantasy to Age of Sigmar. Like, there was literally videos online of people burning their armies.
Still, to this day, I cannot understand that. I get the frustration.
Blows my mind.
This guy's getting 2 shout-outs on a podcast.
He'll continue to get shout-outs. Nobody stopped people playing Warhammer Fantasy.
Yep.
They stopped supporting it as Games Workshop. Nobody said you could stop playing that game.
Even to this day, at CanCon, they do a lot of the smaller events. They still have an old Hammer event there. So even 5 years after it's been dead, they still have every year this tournament that's run and still gets people playing old editions. So
we spoke about this a little bit when Kieran was on the show. And I did a little highlight reel of that clip talking about the guy burning his what do you have?
The Dark Elves?
Dark Elves, yeah, burning his Dark Elves. And the best comment I got on that video was the guy acted like Games Workshop sent a Black Ops team to his house to take his models off him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? If you don't like because we've chat and we'll chat about this more in this podcast in terms of what you like and what you don't like about each edition. We did another clip where we spoke about saying that 10th is better than 9th. That's what we're saying. We weren't saying we didn't say 10th was the best edition ever because we haven't played all the editions. We just simply said 10th is our favorite. And people have said I've given up playing 10th. Like I hate it. You can still play 9th. If you've got your core group of friends, no one's stopping you playing 9th. Well, you don't need to generate that amount of hate towards an edition. It's going to be okay. There's going to be new editions.
Yeah. It's also why they released Heresy, because it's practically 7th edition.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a way for them to catch old ones. But you see the same thing with other games. Like I played virtually every mini game that's come to Australia. I've tried at some point. Even things, like I remember Guild Ball was a big one because it was a bit like Blood Bowl, but a bit more competitive. But they did little seasons that were quite short. I think they were 6 months or a year. And every season it changed from being a kind of a game where the scorers were better and you want to try and score to a game where you just want to try and beat up your opponent. And like every edition people kind of change the list, but never, it was still the same game. And you'll see it for every game that it'll change up, but it's, at the end of the day, it's still going to be the same game. So
yeah. Do you think with how you're saying people getting frustrated, did you feel that in the store when you're working?
I mean, every time a new edition comes out, like even with 10th now, I still talk to people. It's been out a year almost, something like that.
Yeah, it's probably close to a year, probably 8 months, 9 months.
Yeah, and there's still people who come in and like, I refuse to play it, and you get those people with every game. It's the same thing. We say the same thing with the card games and board games. It always happens, but it's just
the thing with the card games though. I mean, I suppose they still do it now. I played a little bit of Vanguard Card Fight Vanguard.
Yep.
The thing that was difficult about that game was they probably do it with a lot of other card games. I don't know. They make cards absolutely obsolete. You cannot play that card anymore.
Yep.
They are not doing that with Warhammer.
No.
They're upgrading stuff. So yeah, your tactical marines, they're eventually going to get pushed to the wayside completely. They will go into Legends 100%, and it will just be intercessors. You won't be able to pick tactical marines. If you want to play tactical marines, go play Heresy. But they're not making models obsolete. They're updating models to give them new models. The rules are still going to stay there. You could still play your tactical marines as intercessors, arguably. If you most people aren't going to have an issue with that. So, it is quite humorous though, the amount of sheer steam coming from people's ears.
Yeah, there's a big term in card games called power creep, and you get it as well in Warhammer. But by having new editions, it kind of resets power creep. And you see it in a lot of card games where they don't have rotations or any kind of restart, and it gets more and more ridiculous. And you end up, it makes it really hard for new players to get in. Like the complexity of the game goes through the roof, and it makes it, you just see the games end up just dying.
Yeah.
And instead, you see it with games like Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons do the same thing as well, where they relaunch in a new edition.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier for people to get into, and kind of just a fresh start. And like you get a lot of people who don't like it because their list that was meta isn't meta anymore. They have to buy a new thing, a new weapon, whatever it is. But it's why Warhammer's still around after 10 years. If they just kept the first ed rules and just kept updating them and putting out new codexes and that,
they wouldn't exist.
They wouldn't.
They just wouldn't be selling models.
Well, you can't get a new player base that way.
Yeah.
You isolate people completely out of the hobby because how would someone like myself get in 10 years in when people have been building these lists for 10 years?
I never played the old world, the fantasy, but the rumors are pretty strong that that's essentially what happened. It was extremely hard for new people to get into fantasy because of how complex it was. And the people had just been playing for so long that if you were new, it was very hard for you to get in to not only learn the rules, let alone play a game that you enjoyed because it was so difficult to learn.
Yeah, so I was working for Games Workshop during the launch of the last edition of Fantasy, and I was working at the independent store during the changeover. And definitely the killer part of Fantasy, the complexity was insane. Trying to teach people how to wheel a movement tray, it's tough. And the other big thing was the price in Fantasy. When you have rank and file games, they just cost more. You need more models. Like an average army in 40k might be 30 models, whereas especially in the last editions of Fantasy, you had units that were 50. So having to buy those models and paint them was just another level of overwhelming. So yeah, between the complexity of that and just the overwhelmingness and the cost, that was kind of what ended up killing fantasy pretty much.
Have you had with the...
But it's back. It's coming back.
With the old world, have you had people already in store chatting about it with you?
100%. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hype for it. I think it's a good move on their behalf to kind of relaunch it. And I think they've, like, a lot of people kind of upset how long they took. I think it's been a good amount of time personally, because I think Age of Sigmar is fully found its feet now. Like, it's a full game. We see, as I said, tournaments in Australia see 200 players. So it's its own unique game. It's its own thing. You can now kind of relaunch fantasy. It's had, you know, enough time to breathe. There's enough time, I think, for the old people to kind of almost clear out and get some, you know, flesh blood in there that are going to be excited for it and going to want it and going to push it and make it, you know, a passion of theirs and grow it. So,
well, it's like you said, the amount of time it disappeared. Now there's a whole new group of tabletop gamers, and all it takes is you to be a tabletop gamer to start to understand almost any other tabletop game you get involved in. So it is much easier for the newer.
5%, yeah. Once you learn it, and again, you see it in card games and other model games and board games. Like, once you kind of learn the key concepts, you can kind of explain. Like, I can explain a board game to someone in, you know, a minute. I can be like, it's an open drafting game, and most people who play board games will get the basic mechanics. Or you can explain card games terms like scrying, which is a magic term, but most games use now. A card game will understand that. And to say now, Warhammer's kind of created this thing where, you know, people understand what weapon skill is, what ballistic skill, armor penetration, and you can use that in all your games, and it makes it easy to jump across. So,
yeah. So, do you have a preference on what would be the easiest for someone to get into at this point?
I'd probably say it's, for the last 5 years, I would have always said fantasy, especially over, Age of Sigmar, I should say, especially over 9th edition 40k. I wasn't a big fan of 9th edition. For someone like me, who's a bit of a casual gamer, I said I can't play that often. It's quite overwhelming. Like, trying to, you know, I write up a list and be like, all right, now I have to work out what stratagems I've got, what can I use, and there's so many. And I said, like, you know, I said earlier, I'm a hobby butterfly, so I have practically every 40k armor there is, and like, I'll play one game with Sisters of Battle, the next I'll use Tyranids. And there's so much to remember from each one. So
yeah, if you're not up to date with all their different rules.
And when I only play a game every few months, it was just really tough. So I hardly played 9th. And I love 10th personally. Like, I've seen a real resurgence in it from a store point of view. We're getting a lot more players into it, which has been great. And I'd say now probably 10th, I reckon, could be easier than Age of Sigmar to get into now. So they're both similar.
They're
but
very
10th,
similar.
Yeah,
they're very similar.
10th might be easier. And there might be a little bit. The new Sigma adds a few extra rules and a command phases and that. So I think 10th might be slightly easier to get into. So
yeah. On that point, now I only started in 6, and you said you started maybe in 4th.
Yeah, 3rd or 4th I would have started properly. Yeah.
If we might go through and list a few things you liked about each edition and stuff you didn't like. And then there might, it'd be testing my memory too. And there might not be something you dislike about a specific edition at all. And keep in mind, like, I didn't play I played maybe 2 games of 9th, but it's because I also, like Glen, did not like it.
Yep.
I might start. So in 6th edition, for me, it was a little bit more of a difficult edition for people to get into because there was so many rules in that core rule book. So examples would be, if you're an infantry, every infantry moves 6 inches, and unless you knew that, like, there was nothing on a data slate or anything telling you how far a unit moved, and like it was almost flat across the board from memory. So like, if you were a walker, all walkers moved the same distance.
Yeah, it was like keywords, and they all had the same special abilities, and yeah. 6 was a tough one. I think I really enjoyed 6. I was working for the company at the time, so like, I started working when 5th was out. 5th, I think, was probably my favorite edition.
They were very similar, 5th and 6?
6 was more of a errata and a bit of a tweak, but the fundamentals were the same. So I think for me, 5th and 6th, I could just group together, really. And I have good memories because it was probably the time I spent the most time playing Warhammer.
Yeah.
I was working for the company. I was playing 40k weekly. It was my favorite system. I'd play events regularly, so I got to learn the game really well.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, I've got real rose-tinted glasses looking back at it.
A lot of nostalgia.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know if it was 6th where they updated every codex, I feel.
think
Or
it
was
was.
close to every codex.
Yeah, there was a few where they did the 5. I think it might have been. Maybe some, there was one where they did the 5 black books that they released. It was like the 2 Imperial, the 2
That
Chaos.
was the
the
start
later.
of 8th.
That was 8th? Okay.
That
cool.
was the start of 8th. The
'cause that had a
the
bit of
indexes.
backlash.
The
Yeah.
indexes. I think from what I saw with 6 and up until now, obviously releases have increased vastly.
Yeah.
So new models, codex is getting updated, FAQs. Back in 5th, I think if your book wasn't good
Yep.
and there wasn't stuff good in that book, that was your book.
Yeah, 100%. From a gaming point of view, you mentioned earlier the biggest changes. That's definitely been it. Just the frequency. Like back when I worked there, back in the day, there was one release a month, and it was one army. So you'd only if this month Scave was coming out, that was it. If you're a 40k player, too bad. You might get something tiny that might interest you, but it was pretty much there wasn't much. And like releases, you'd find out about also really fun events. I remember finding out about Space Wolves, seeing the big Space Wolves riding the wolves, seeing them 9 months before they came out. Whereas they don't do any of that now. Now it's like the staff find out the same day as customers. Like we watch the same reveal trailers that everyone else does, and they just pump out. Obviously, there's a release practically every week, and it won't just be for one system. They'll have there's some stuff for 40k, but there's still an AOS novel or something little here as well. So that's definitely been the biggest change from a gaming point of view. Is just how much there is and how frequently they update it.
Did that slowly ramp up, or did it hit a point where they just exploded?
It was. I think the big change for Games Workshop I noticed was when they lost the old CEO, whatever his name was. I can't remember his first name. Kirby. So if you look at Games Workshop back 15 years ago, that's when the reputation for Games Workshop being this evil jerk corporation existed. He was either the CEO or something on the board. He was very money focused. He wanted to make money. That was all he cared about. How can we make the most money? He didn't want to engage with the community. This is back before Games Workshop had the YouTube. They did the White Dwarf. That was it. They didn't listen to feedback. It was very businessy. It seemed like you'd be working any other retail kind of company. When he left and the newer guys stepped in, that's when they started engaging with the community more. You'd see the YouTube videos. That's where they brought in all the painters. They'd engage with the community. If the community posted negative feedback, they'd engage with them and be like, hey, we hear you. We want to improve it. They started getting play testers in to help with the rules and doing those things so they could actually become a lot more open with everyone. So people could engage with them, feel like they're part of a community, not like the strict here's Games Workshop, here's the community.
Yeah. Nice.
That was the beginning. I think he left probably 10 odd years ago now, and that was where you probably saw the biggest change. In terms of the more releases, I think that's just slowly built up. I'm sure if you look back, there'll be some date where they went from once a month to practically weekly. But that's just been a continuous upgrade, really.
Yeah. And you think, like, overly, would that be... Do you think it's a positive thing for the hobby having
I do.
that many?
I mean, there's a term that's more familiar for board gamers called Cult of the New, where, especially in board games, there's always new games coming out. Like, every other week there's a board game out. Because there's so many different companies putting stuff out. And people can get very focused on only the new stuff. And you can get models which people kind of get left behind. And we probably saw that a bit with the COVID years. Like, because a bunch of models came out during COVID, people didn't really see them. They weren't playing games, weren't going to stores to look at them. They kind of got left behind. I even know, I'll sometimes look at the shelf and be like, when did that model come out? Like, it came out 2 years ago. I've never even seen it because it came out during those time. But I think generally it's a positive to have more models. Like, again, the more people playing, more options is good. If you don't like it, you can kind of ignore it. If some new Gene Stealer cult model comes out and you just don't think it looks cool, don't buy it. Like,
yeah,
it's pretty simple. And then, if 2 months later a cool model comes out, grab that one. So
yeah, more options for everyone.
yeah, it's just as I said earlier, kind of more people playing, more options. It's never a bad thing. Even you see a little bit now with kind of we're seeing some of the 3D printing stuff starting. Obviously, it can be a bit of a slippery slope, but like as more people get in, you see more custom bits. Like I'm not a big 3D printer, but seeing custom shoulder pads or little bits here and there can be really cool. So
yeah, just little bits that add to the theatrics of it all.
Yeah, and you just see more of everything. So
yeah. Did you guys have any crazy rules you remember from those earlier editions? Is there anything like I know you said wheeling?
Again, touching on the stuff that I liked and I didn't like from editions. 7th edition was, I think, the edition I played the most of any edition, and they had formations. Was it called formations? Yeah, it was called
Yeah.
formations. And you essentially got bonuses. You got bonuses for taking specific units. So it was a way for them to, I guess, push a bit more of a themed list. And it was stuff like, this is when I played my Tau. It was stuff like a Riptide Wing, which was an extremely popular formation because it was very, very good. I can't remember the exact details. I feel like it was whenever you did your Nova Reactor, which was powering up the suit, you got to pick 2 bonuses instead of 1. So you could power up your gun and your shield instead of just doing the gun. So
As long as you fulfilled that Riptide.
as long as you
Yeah.
took 3 Riptides and put them in that formation, you benefit from that. The rest of if you took another single Riptide, he wasn't part of that formation.
Yeah.
But that was probably that edition. Formations were probably my favorite thing, and also my least favorite thing,
100%.
because Games Workshop seemed to release their editions in pairs: 6th and 7th, 8th and 9th, 10th, and what will be 11th. And the secondary edition always seems the one they ramp those power levels up, and then games just get a bit too hectic for my liking.
Yep.
They get a bit too fast. Models get removed from the board too fast, which for someone who spends such a long time painting their models is extremely painful.
It's devastating.
But there was stuff like your AdMech. They had this is when you paid for war gear. There was some detachment or formation, and you didn't pay for war gear. So if you wanted all
Ahead
the
of the
plasma,
curve.
you want ahead of the curve. You wanted all that plasma. You didn't pay that extra 60 points for that unit. You just got it. There was a detachment for Space Marines, free transports. Like, it had to be a dedicated transport. It couldn't be a Land Raider, but it could be a bunch of Razorbacks with heavy bolters. It could be a bunch of drop pods.
Yeah.
It
It was
was-
a fun edition. Personally, I'm in the same boat. I really loved it because I love thematic lists.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was tough. Like, it reminded me a lot, a few years earlier when they did the Apocalypse release, they had similar things. So you could take like 3
Ye-
Vindicators and they got one of the big Apocalypse size blast templates, which were each of the sides of a dinner plate. They were great.
Like this, dude.
They were great. One
Massive.
of the funnest things when you
Wait,
just see them,
really?
they look
Yeah,
so,
yeah. And the closer you were to the center, the more
It did more-
damage you took.
They looked fake. And there was a giant flamer template that was like 8 inches long and 9. It looked fake, but it was great. And they did that for that, and it was really fun. But competitively, it broke the game, and it reminded me a little bit probably before your time. I think it was probably 4th edition Space Marine Codex. You got to choose. You could make your own chapters, and you could choose pros and cons for them. And in theory, it was great because you could get someone who was really thematic, who wanted to do this really cool chapter, who had a great backstory, and had these really nasty cons, but really great pros. But competitive players just went, cool, I'm going to take all these great things.
I'm going to take all the
Yeah,
best stuff.
I'm going to take the negative, I can't use flamers. I wasn't going to anyway. Doesn't matter at all. Or I can't use transports, whatever, I'm just going to take vehicles.
Yeah, deep-striping Terminators.
And they're all getting, +1 strength for their guns. So it was just like, you could pick and, for competitive guys, they could just break the system. And it reminded me a little bit the same thing, where like competitive players could just really exploit and take the
Min-max?
ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the negatives were so small that with some of them, you just be like, it didn't matter. I was never going to take a broadside. I'm just going to take hammerheads. It's fine. So it created this weird mix where casual players really loved it, but you'd also hate it at the same time.
Yeah. So what edition was that one with the...
It was 6th and 7th and 8th, I think was the one.
So 7th was the one that took formations. 8th was the reset with the indexes.
That was right. Yep.
And the fantastic thing about 8th for me was how simple it was.
Yeah.
That's
8th
when
was good.
that's when they got rid of the mass core rulebook, and most of your rules were on your page for the unit. So your data slate had how far things moved. The cool thing about that was all of a sudden Eldar that are meant to be really quick and nimble on the battlefield were moving 7 inches with an infantry, and your Terminators were now moving like 5,
Yeah.
which in the scheme of the game and like the lore, it didn't make sense for Terminators to keep up with Eldar. Like it just made little sense. So for me, 8th was fantastic with the simple reset, and I did play a fair amount of that. And they started to bring in the stratagems. For me,
Yes.
stratagems is, and it's less so this edition, but stratagems through 9th felt like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Trap
Very
card.
much. Yeah.
Big ones for me were stuff like, and I play Space Marines. A big one for me was transhuman, right? You do all this massive work getting across the table with a combat unit. You've done really well to get in a position for a charge. All of a sudden, you're wounding on a 4+. It doesn't matter. You've got all these really powerful weapons. You're just wounding me on a 4+, and it completely negated stuff like again for Blood Angels, your rule was +1 to wound on the charge. Cool. Your core rule for your army is negated by one stratagem. And it wasn't just that Blood Angels. It was stuff like there was people called it trans hitman. So you could only hit something on a 4. So you might have had something that gets bonuses to hit. Completely negated. So on the other side of that, in 8th, there were stratagems where you could spend a strat at the start of the game and upgrade a unit. For me, that was really cool. All of a sudden, you could make veteran assault intercessors, which weren't that much better than anything else. You got an extra attack and extra leadership, but thematically having some assault intercessors with white helmets for your ultramarines that were veterans, very, very cool. So
from a hobby point of view, you could just like do really fun things. Like you'd have an army that was, beat up and they'd been to a bunch of wars and have them all scratched up and missing limbs and like do some fun stuff. So
yeah, that's what I really liked about that. And then for me, the strats got pushed too far. Things just got too killy. Things just got removed from the board too much for 9th. So ninth, I just did a hard pass. I didn't complain about it. I was like, well, do you know what? I'm not playing much 9th. I'm going to focus on my painting.
Yeah, I'd say editions only last 3 or 4 years nowadays, so it's not that long. But with stratagems, I think as a thing, obviously in a lot of board games, people really dislike, which is gotchas. So if you look at, there'll be a lot of people, as soon as you see that a board game has a gotcha style mechanic, they'll just ignore it. It's pretty much a time when you fall into a trap that you weren't aware of. So hidden information and stratagems are a really good example, because a new player, they're not going to know every stratagem. They'll walk their guys up, be like, all right, I'm ready for a fight, and then they'll get hit by the transhuman.
Yeah.
Or they'll see, a unit coming down a drop pod that they know aren't that scary and be like, oh, I won't worry about them. But then they'll pump a few stratagems on them. Suddenly they're just wiping a unit and they're doing way more than what they should.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a benefit to that, but it got pushed a little bit to the extreme for me. I do like strats. They've got a place in the game, like Red Rampage for Blood Angels. You can fall out of combat and recharge. Yeah. There's cool stuff like that. But I feel like 11th edition, when it comes out, we'll start to ramp up again. And I guess I'm just gonna have to deal with it, because if we're gonna start trying to push more stuff for Battleforge Gaming, I'll just have to learn to roll with the punches.
Yeah. With stratagems as well, one of the things I end up doing, especially with 9th, if I was teaching new players how to play, is I just ignore them. Because trying to teach a new player already, if they haven't played too many games, all the moving and the dice rolling, all these tables, trying to do stratagems is just a whole nother thing. So I found a lot of the games I played of 9th, we just ignored them. We just skipped them, or just used them for command point reroll, and that was all you could do with it. Keep it simple and do that, and it made it easier for new players. I'm sure diehard tournament players would have hated us, but
Yeah. Oh, you got to get into the hobby somehow, though.
Yeah.
So with stratagems, the first edition they showed up was 8th.
Yeah, they started bringing them in 8th. Yeah. And it did start out with very basic ones like heroic bravery. You didn't have to do a battle shock test. The CP reroll started out very basic. Then it grew and grew and grew. And like I said, there's a place for it, but sometimes it feels very gotcha. There's a little bit too much, which if you're going to play the game, you need to learn to
if you want to play, if you're playing competitive events, I get that. One of the other kind of points as well, in Australia as a whole, but in Melbourne and a lot, we don't play competitively. You'll see, if you watch a lot of metas and you see the Australian meta, it's really different to the rest of the world. And I mean, there could be a few factors. I guess maybe we just enjoy doing silly, dumb stuff. Pricing probably plays a part of it. Australia pays more for Warhammer. If you convert it across, it is expensive over here. So people don't want to meta chase as much because it just costs more. But traditionally, Australians just don't play super competitive lists. A lot of our tournaments will have comp scores. So ARC, famously, they'll have a comp score. So when you submit your list, you'll get grade out of 10. And if you're running a really filth list, you'll get lower score there, which will hurt your overall tournament standing. So you might win every game and score 10-0 in every game. But if you're only getting 3 out of 10 for comp, out of the 20, you're only scoring 13. Whereas if you run a list that's, a 6 or a 7, a nice balanced list, and then win your games 8-0, you're going to place higher in the end. So it's something that's kind of a weird part of Australian hobby. So
yeah, I wonder if that is unique to the Australian hobby. If it'd be interesting you know, if we chat to some of the guys in Europe and stuff like that.
Well, like you've spoken about, again, Australia's got a slightly different meta, and we're known for it, and we're by no means bad at the hobby
We've had
whatsoever.
players, yeah,
Guys go to
well.
tournaments and they score very well, but they generally specialize at a specific army, and I think a lot of it does come down to that price point. You want to start a new army.
What did Lockie call it? Was it Codex Specialist?
Maybe Codex
that's
Specialist,
a
yeah.
common term,
Yeah. So I guess that's something that's come about the way that we do the hobby here. It's
I think the way, especially like when people start doing that way, they'll kind of spread that as well, and everyone else will join. I remember listening to like a AOS Stats Center kind of thing, and he was saying that always in Australia, there's always way more corn players than anywhere else, and for some reason Australians just like corn. I know it's like killing stuff, and we don't like thinking, so it's just a way. So
makes sense to me.
Yeah, that checks out.
For me, we'll chat about 10th now, which I think is fantastic, and it goes together with how the hobby and where the hobby is going. So for me, 10th is absolutely fantastic with detachments. So we've only seen a few codexes so far. There's 4, I think: Space Marines, Tyranids, Necrons, Admech.
Admech, yep.
I think that's it. For me, what's really great about this is now you can paint Blood Angels and you can play them in a White Scar list.
Yep.
If you want bikes, you can take bikes and you get the benefits for that. So it's very clever by Games Workshop. They can sell more models that people wouldn't otherwise be buying. And there'll be people, because there's people all around the world, surprised, but there'll be people that are disappointed that there is that flexibility for whatever reason. I don't know why. People just get grumpy over a lot of stuff, but I cannot see how it is a negative whatsoever to be able to play your chapter, your Forge World, your Hive Fleet, and take the models you want. So you don't need to take the battle line. You can take all the big bugs, and you can get all the big bug benefits for a specific Hive.
I think it'll be people that are like the people that are frustrated and outraged by that sort of stuff will be the ones that are potentially sticklers for the lore and things like that. But I think what they have to remember is, you know, it's the gaming side of it is only half of the hobby. So if you're painting your army, you want to enjoy painting them. You want them aesthetically to be your type and feel. And if their rules, it seems like such a shame and such a waste if the rules of that army that you paint don't match the style of play that you want to do. Like, it seems so you're forcing someone down a lane based on paint choice.
On that as well, I remember back in the day at Games Workshop, we used to have a thing called the hobby pie. So effectively the hobby was divided into 6 different parts. So like painting was one, gaming was one, converting, I think terrain was its own one, law, so like rules and that. And it must have been, there was 6 parts anyway. And it was the thing was you want to you'll get people who appeal to different areas. Someone like we get customers who come and buy books from us. Every new release, they'll come and buy a novel. They've never touched the game, 0 interest in painting. They just love the lore and the world. And you get people who just paint and just do that. And like that's a part is, you know, those lore people can just do that. They can just read the novels. You can still make your list. If you want to run White Scars and only bikes, you can still do that.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then you have options.
Yeah, exactly. And like we touched on earlier, like if the more options for people, the better it is for everyone. More people will play. The community will grow. The hobby will just get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
and with the community getting bigger and the hobby getting bigger, I think looking at the most recent reveals we've seen of the Dark Angels and what we've seen from Black Templars is just going to continue that. They're just starting to. You were talking about when was that point when they started to release more stuff? It looks like they're doing another bump with their stuff because they've arguably added units to a Dark Angel Codex that didn't need it, right? They've added these companion models which look fantastic, but the Codex never needed them. You've got Blade Guard, you've got the Deathwing Knights, you've got a bunch of combat armies. All of a sudden, and it probably makes sense lore-wise, I don't know enough, all of a sudden there's these cool as extra elite units coming out called companions, which only means good news for not only other Space Marine chapters because they're bringing back some heresy units to 40k.
Yep.
So think about the smaller chapters like Salamanders that have nothing except 2 characters, I think.
Yep.
Think about them potentially getting some unique units, or the Imperial Fists.
Yeah.
But I think it's good for every other faction that's out there as well, because they seem to be doing lots of work on their sculpts.
Yeah, even like the fact this, the last 2 weeks, whenever the last week was, they released 2 codexes and 2 Star collecting boxes at the same time. So that was something that generally they'll do, that'll be over 2 weeks in the past. So a sign they could be ramping up more releases. I know the Old World release coming out is a huge drop. So I think it's one of the biggest releases I've ever seen on release day. So they're not slowing down.
Promising things in the hobby.
Yeah, very exciting time. I know we say it. We probably say it every podcast. It's just
We're going to keep saying it every podcast. If you don't like hearing it, then
Yeah.
it's a very exciting time to be in the.
Yeah, it's definitely. I know one of the other podcasts I listen to. They say it's pretty much like the best time to be in the hobby. It's at a renaissance time. Effectively, it's just you're seeing so many games, and as I said earlier, like with 3D printing, we're going to see more independent games launching, and little things like that, which you're going to try, and people are going to be putting stuff out there. And a lot of them aren't going to be great. They're not going to be around long, but it's cool to see. And then you'll see bigger companies using some of those rules and techniques, or hiring those people to do their stuff. So
Totally, yeah. It becomes a more competitive market, which makes things better for all the people playing and
especially recently as well. Games Workshop's kind of been. They used to be a bit closer in who was kind of in the number 1, 2, 3 spots in terms of minigame sales, kind of globally. Like we had X-Wing for a long time, which is the pre-painted models that were globally doing really well. We used to see Warhammer Hordes that used to go really well in Australia. At least that's kind of completely died off. So Games Workshop really has kind of taken over the market fully in Australia. So we'll see as some other games kind of start launching how that changes. But
yeah. Whereas what's coming up in the future for your hobby?
As I said, I'll probably be jumping around a lot, as I always do. So I always plan to kind of focus and knock out things, but usually not the case. But I'll probably look at getting some stuff up for Arc. That's a few months away now. So I'll look at an army closer. Usually my kind of idea with armies, I usually try and plan out about a month before an event, because I know otherwise I'm just going to change. If I try and start an army now for a tournament in 2 or 3 months, I'll end up getting distracted and changing. So I usually try and do about a month out, because that's as far as my attention span goes. So
this will be a freshly painted army for you?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I usually don't run the same army tournaments, just because, again, I just like doing different things. It's fun to see new projects. Usually once I've kind of played an army, I just like to see what else I can do in that. So it helps working at game stores, because, as we've said, it can be expensive, but benefit of working at game stores, you can usually get things a little bit cheaper, so that helps.
You also get models for basically 10% cheaper from General Games Churnside Park.
Straight up true.
That's so good.
But I'm definitely keen on some Old Hammer. The Old World stuff looks great. I had some Bretonians from back in the day, so I'll be keen to get them. So that'll be a big thing, and I'm sure hopefully we'll see some events in that rolling in. So yeah, and then also, as I mentioned kind of earlier as well, looking at doing some bust painting with the Crimson Brush and try and test myself there and kind of really challenge my painting. So we'll see how that goes.
So you're painting one up for this CanCon, are you?
So I won't be doing one for this CanCon, but for next year's I want to try and enter a few different things and go up there, and they've got a whole painting studio you can kind of sit at while you're up there. So try and do that and hang out with some painters who are much better than me, and hopefully steal some of their ideas. So
yeah, awesome. That's very exciting. Because what's CanCon this year? February?
January. So it's I think it's Australia weekend. It's about 2 weeks away, so quite soon. So
that's coming up quick.
Yeah, I got a few friends going, so I know a few of them are quite new to the hobby. So probably give them a hand painting up their armies as well. So yeah.
Fantastic. It's a lot to look forward to this year.
Be a busy one, so.
Yeah, definitely, especially with the new store happening as well.
Yeah, so I guess I'll also be painting, for the store point of view, I'll be doing up a bunch of whole tables. So we've just got some of the Knights of Dice, their Neo Japan terrain, I think it's called, which is really cool kind of MDF terrain. Unfortunately, those guys actually don't exist anymore, but they had some awesome terrain. So I'll be doing up like a whole Neo Japan kind of board, which will be fun, and just a few other things. So we'll see what else we can plan out.
You mentioned the hobby pie.
Yep.
Earlier, which I'd never heard that term before.
Yeah, so it's an old Games Workshop thing. So as I was saying earlier, Games Workshop do a lot of training and stuff. So you learn, they have a lot of kind of insider terms. They have the 10 Commandments for any old people who worked at Games Workshop. They'll be very familiar with those, which is pretty much how you kind of serve customers.
Yeah.
But yeah, they used to have the hobby pie, which is kind of the 6 parts of the hobby. I have it somewhere, I'm sure. But it's kind of just, the way people engage with the hobby. So whether it's, building models, painting models, just reading the lore, or just playing games. So it's kind of different ways. It was a really cool thing. I remember back in the day when I worked there, we used to do was kind of you draw up your pie, like how you'd spend your time. So out of 100,
that was what I was going to ask you next.
it's a really cool thing. I'll find it. I'll shoot it through to you guys because it's a really fun kind of way to view. We used to do where your hobby is currently and where you kind of want it to be. So like currently for me, I probably do a lot more lore stuff just because when I often I'll read the novels and do that because it's all I got kind of free time for. So that probably takes up a bigger part of my pie than ideally I'd like. And I spend a lot less time gaming than I like. So currently my gaming percentage might be 5%. I'd love to get up to 20% kind of thing. So
yeah. And have you found, like, with all your years across the hobby, have you found that you've always preferred one part of the hobby?
Not really. I think in my head, especially initially, I was definitely more into the gaming. I came from a kind of playing card games and that I was more a gamer. And as I've kind of done more painting and also got better at it and seen how much is out there, I've definitely swung across a lot more to painting. Like having guys just like yourselves who just paint up awesome stuff is just great for inspiration. So I'll see that, I'll be on Instagram scrolling through, see one of Justin's new models and like that little bit of inspiration, be like, man, I should jump on and finish that army or do something like try something new and end up, loving painting a lot more than I used to. And also just due to time, with family constraints and that, I might have an hour at night and, it's not enough time to go play a game, but I can jump on and do a bit of painting. So
Yeah.
it's definitely, painting's become a lot larger area of my hobby pie. So
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess we see that every day with Justin's stream. Like a lot of people come across his work and they're like, inspired to pick up the brush and try test themselves a bit with their painting.
yeah, and I've said it like 4 times now, but like the one thing, one message I'd love to leave is if you can like inspire others, like it's only a good thing. If the hobby grows, you're going to see more people, you're going to make more friends, you're going to see, that little kid who's that stunning painter, he could be the next pro painter who's making videos and inspiring people.
Yeah.
And that's just, if you can, leave that kind of legacy on a hobby, even if you only do this hobby for 6 months, if you can inspire someone else and get them into it, it's awesome. And like so many of my friends I've met through the hobby. And it's just, if you can, do that, it's just a great thing. So
Fantastic.
It's a pretty good note to
wrap up
wrap up on.
So yeah, that brings us to the end of episode 8. A massive thank you to Glen from General Games Churnside Park. And thank you to everyone watching and listening across the streaming services. Is there anything else we need to catch people up on before we head off?
Undoubtedly, they will see multiple posts involving both BFG and General Games, so they'll get updates with that. I don't think there is. We've got a guest for episode 9 already lined up.
Yep.
Which is
2 weeks' time.
Exciting. I think we've crossed all the paths we've needed to.
Yeah.
For this one.
It's been fantastic. I think I've probably got a million more questions for you, Glenn, but we might have to get you back for another one on that part.
mate, I will happily come back. It's been awesome.
Fantastic. All right, guys, we'll catch you next time.
See you
Thanks
guys.
very much.
Thanks.
Did that one shut it off?
I did stop streaming, didn't I?
You might have said yes. We got it.
Secret behind the scenes.